Is it when?
Yeah.
Sick. All right. Well, my name's Alex, and of course, there's the five of you. There's definitely there. So we're going to be doing a short, informative speech regarding the how and what of apologetics. So when we do apologetics in ministry context, especially in youth ministry, which is what I work in often, there's a lot of confusion regarding how we do apologetics, what even apologetics is. So we're going to kind of get into the meat and potatoes of what apologetics should look like, and also what it looks like in the status quo. So generally it's a question about what is God and how to defend the reality of God or the reality of specific gods. Obviously there's different religions and they all have different defenses of their creeds, faiths, doctrines, and so on. So it makes a larger question about what is God, but there's also a caveat for how we do apologetics. So our caveat in the Christian faith comes from 1 Peter 3:15, which says, "But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you, to give reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect." And that's obviously the very important caveat. Now also, I think a second caveat is that apologetics comes from the Koine Greek word apologia, which is to make a defense of. Now, defense is different than offense. This is something that I've struggled with a lot, in the sense that you don't go around picking fights on Facebook telling people you don't believe in God and here's 9 reasons why you're an idiot and we got to fix this. There's obviously a distinction between how this is done and how it should be done. So without attempting to create an argument for why you all should believe in God, we're going to instead understand what apologetics even is, so that we would be able to do it. It is quite simply providing answers when asked. Knowledge is a fire, but wisdom is control. So fire can obviously bring light and warmth, but it can also destroy and maim. So the idea is to be able to utilize that knowledge in a form and with wisdom, with the ability to leverage it in ways in which it's needed contextually. So that brings us to the second question: what is evidence? Apologetics, like I said, comes from the Greek word that says to make an answer for. Evidence is simply just being able to create an example of that. Now, whether it's historical or prophetic or philosophical, there's going to be different ways in which you explain why something is true, and that's always going to be an answer to what you think is true in the first place. So if someone is an apologetician, or an apologist, as people that speak English say, they would probably say, like, I think God is real. That's the claim. And they say, I think God is real because. That because is the warrant, the reason, the defense for. So I'm going to give a couple of examples of different evidential proofs that, a Christian such as yourself might be able to do if someone were to come to you and say, hey, I'm interested in Christianity, but I also just don't know how to reconcile this. So here's 3 fairly consistent things that I've heard, that when we do apologetics, we have to do it in a certain way. Obviously that way is when they come to you, as opposed to looking for avenues in which we attempt to go to them and give them this good word. There's a difference between apologetics and intellectual argumentation and evangelism. So the way in which we do that is when they come to us. So one popular example among new atheists, because that's the movement that we live in, is the historical argument. Like, Jesus didn't even exist, which is, I think, a ludicrous argument, but nonetheless, there's reasons why we wouldn't believe this is true. There's reasons why, although people might want to question the credibility of Jesus as a historical figure, you can rest assured that Jesus did exist. I think this is the central claim upon which Christianity stands, but nonetheless, though there's a few reasons. Jesus existed, and there's reasons to why that happened. Jesus' tomb was empty. Different groups have verified him. It's like seeing him alive, both of the Christian, Jew, a variety of different factions within that ancient world. This is combined with the question of motive, which is reversed by the persecution that drove Christians underground for the first 200 to 300 years. What is the reason why people would fabricate a lie about a particular person? It obviously wasn't for power or financial gain, which are obvious to, kind of first gain reasons why people would say, oh, well, obviously you would want Christianity to exist because look at the world and all that it's done. This is obviously not what would have happened. In the first year of Christianity, there was a jump from a few hundred to 20,000 new believers. In the second year, we were at 2 million. That kind of exponential growth is happening in the beginning persecution-based periods of the early church. So there's no motive, because if they're not getting money and they're not getting political influence, and this is generally a bunch of ragtag believers anyways, then there has to be something more. It points to the fact that there was an eyewitness account for, a Christian faith, for a Christ-specific faith. And this is evidenced by Dr. William Lane Craig's debate with Edwin Curley, of which the transcript of which warrants the Jesus tomb being empty in the different groups. These are arguments that he made in those debates. But it's also evidenced by Dr. Gary Habermas's Historical Jesus, Ancient Evidence for the Life of Christ. He's a professor here at Liberty. He's also the foremost scholar on the historicity of Jesus. So if there's anyone which these questions should be gone through, they should be filtered through him. The second argument is prophetic, that Jesus may have existed, but he probably wasn't God. He was a cool hippie that existed and paraded through the Middle East, but he wasn't a supernatural being, parading with miracles and turning water into wine. That is also not true. The Dr. Kennedy from the Knox Theological Society indicates that hundreds of fulfilled prophecies verify the spiritual authenticity of Christ as the coming Messiah that the Jews foretold on, but also that that it verifies the New Testament as a text, as a continuation of the canon of the Bible, and as we know it now. There's a few specific prophecies that he lists in one of his articles that I'll go through quickly. So there is one example is a prophecy in 1000 BC said that they also gave me gall for my food, and for my thirst they gave me vinegar. Fulfillment in 30 AD when Jesus was persecuted on the cross, and he was literally, that was the food he was given, and he was given vinegar on a sponge as a kind of like last insult to the king that was persecuted. A second prophecy is in 515 B, approximately BC, and he said to them, "If it is good within your sight, you give me wages, but if not, never mind." So they weighed out 30 shekels of silver as my wages. Then the Lord said to me, "Throw it to the potter, the magnificent price at which I valued them." So I took them 30 shekels of silver and threw them to the potter of the house of the Lord. This is obviously also fulfilled in 30 AD when Judas was betrayed for 30 shekels of silver. The silver was thrown out into the street because of the shame that he had for betraying his Lord. And this is just like two of literally hundreds, which I don't have the time to go into, which even Dr. Kennedy will contend on thousands of prophecies that connect the Old and the New Testament. It allows us to have a Bible that is continuous and harmonious, especially in a world where it's very popular to say that they are very disjunctive, they're two different gods. This indicates that this is all the same God, which is further verified in John 6 when Jesus says, "The Father and I are one." Moving sort of along, there's a question of paradoxes. Now, I don't think this is really that much of a logical argument by way of those means. I think Dr. David Bentley Hart in Atheist Delusions pretty much more eloquently than I at least breaks down this argument as an emotional question of the goodness of God. As a friend of mine once said, this might mean that God isn't awesome, but it doesn't mean that God isn't God. And this is the question of like, where was God in the tsunami? Where was God in 9/11? Where is God in wars or in political persecution or in poverty or in homelessness and so on and so forth? If God is supposed to be so good and then these so bad of things happen, where could God possibly be? So obviously doesn't change the fact that God is still God. It questions whether or not God is good, but that already concedes the claim that God exists a priori. So when people are attempting to have that conversation, it's important to be able to narrow out what someone is saying and what they mean, what discussion they want to have. So I'll make the last caveat as I end here, is like this video is not meant to persuade, this speech is not meant to persuade you on the reality of God, just inform about the variety of outlets that we have to enrich our faith, to make our faith stronger. In all things we should be searching, in all things that we should pray, and ultimately we should handle this knowledge with wisdom, It should not simply be knowledge. A fire can consume or it can bring light. So let it bring light.